Have you ever been pitched an investment opportunity? One that sounds, well, almost too good to be true.
Happens all the time.
And then you're left wondering, okay, how often do those really grand promises, how often do they actually diverge from the underlying facts?
Right. What's really backing it up?
Exactly. What happens when these complex financial structures, the ones on paper, what if they hide a reality that's, well, far less reassuring for the actual money involved?
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to embark on a bit of a deep dive. We're looking into what our source material calls, quite fascinatingly, Jackson's Tangled Web.
Intriguing title.
It is. Our mission, really, is to shed some light on the workings of two specific companies, Northumberland Living Elmwick Ltd. And WH 2022 Ltd. That second one trades as a venture in climate.
Okay.
We'll be pulling out insights about, transparency, investor protection, asset security, really important stuff. And hopefully revealing what our source describes as not just poor practice, but potentially a pattern of behavior that needs to be looked at very carefully.
And that's absolutely the core challenge, isn't it? It's so critical to look beyond, the glossy promotions.
Yeah, the shiny surface.
Exactly. You have to get into the paperwork, the detail. You've got to ask those basic questions. Are the assets actually there? Are they secured properly in a way that really protects your investment?
Right.
And crucially, how many different investments might be leaning on the same, maybe insufficient backing? That's often where the real story starts to unravel.
Okay, so let's start untangling this web then. First up, Northumberland Living Elmwick Ltd. Now, this one was promoted pretty heavily, particularly by a firm called New Capital Link, or NCL. And the messages NCL put out, well, they sounded incredibly reassuring. Things like the purchase has been agreed and a deposit has been paid and planning permission has been granted with more approvals on the way. They even cited a specific planning reference number.
So it's buttoned up.
On the surface, yeah, it sounds pretty definitive, doesn't it?
It certainly does. But the immediate issue, the thing that jumps out, is the contrast between those messages and what the actual paperwork showed.
Okay, what did it show?
Well, Alpha Trustee Services is named as the security trustee in the investment documents, sure. But our investigation found they were only meant to become active after the company actually bought the asset.
Ah, so not from day one.
Not immediately, no. And maybe more critically, company's house records at the time showed the land itself was still under a charge, basically a legal claim from the seller, a company called Moorlands.
Right.
That strongly suggests it was still a conditional sale, not quite the done deal presented.
Okay, but the land deal did eventually happen.
It did, yes.
Yeah.
It went through in April 2024 for just over $1.1 million.
So it closed.
It closed.
Right.
And this is such a critical insight for any investor, despite the sale finally happening, there is no registered charge from Alpha Trustee Services specifically protecting the investors in Northumberland Living Elmwick Ltd.
Not at all.
No, it really highlights a crucial point. Just seeing a security trustee's name in the brochure isn't enough.
Right.
You absolutely must check that a specific registered charge exists that legally ties your investment to the promised asset. Without that registration, the security is, well, it's essentially just on paper. It leaves investors without a direct claim if things go sideways.
So where is the security then?
Well, bizarrely, the security seems to be connected to a completely different company.
Which one?
WH 2022 Ltd, the one that trades as Elmwick Climate.
Okay, wait. So the security for the Elmwick property investment isn't linked to the Elmwick property, but to this other company, Aventurine.
That appears to be the case based on the registered charges, yes.
So if the Elmwick land wasn't the security, what did you find when you looked into the charges linked to WH 2022 Ltd? What were those arrangements?
Okay, so this is where it gets even more intricate. We found a charge registered in July 2023 in favor of Alpha Trustee Services, yes. But crucially, it doesn't mention the Elmwick land at all.
So what does it mention?
It's tied to a gas peaking facility. Basically, a small power plant designed to fire up quickly during peak electricity demand.
Okay.
And WH 2022 Ltd bought this facility from a company called Southbrook Gas Generation Ltd. And here's another red flag. Southbrook Gas Generation is now in liquidation.
Liquidation? Why?
Action taken by HMRC, the tax authority. So its assets are being sold off to pay debts.
Wow. Okay. That doesn't sound ideal.
Not ideal at all. And there's more. There's a second charge from September 2023, also naming Alpha Trustee Services. But this one doesn't even specify what, if anything, is actually backing the loan notes it's supposed to secure. It's completely vague.
Vague. And just to remind ourselves, Northumberland Living Elmwick Ltd, the property one, was supposed to raise £2.5 million.
Correct. That was the target raise.
But, putting the paperwork aside for a second, what about on the ground? When reporters actually went to the Elmwick site, did they find a project underway?
Well, that's another point where the reality seems to clash with the promises.
How so?
They found nothing. No visible development, no construction work, no activity whatsoever. Just quiet.
So, eerily quiet compared to the project in motion idea.
Yeah.
It's like building a house just based on a blueprint that only exists in someone's head, maybe.
That's a good analogy. The physical reality didn't match the promotion.
And it seems investors are noticing these gaps, too. The concerns aren't just staying behind closed doors. We've seen some pretty stark quotes from Google reviews.
Oh, really? What are they saying?
Well, one says, and I'm quoting directly, "Please do not invest money in this company. I did it years ago, and they have not paid me back. I think it is a scam. I plan to raise public awareness."
Wow. Strong words.
Very. And another one, even more pointed. "Broken promises and missed dates. Billy Jackson makes promises he does not keep. If you want delayed payments and frustration, this is the company to go for." Irene McKenzie's not much better.
And who are Jackson and McKenzie in this context?
Billy Jackson seems to be the central figure, and Irene McKenzie is identified in some materials as the head of investor relations.
Right. Head of investor relations dealing with frustrated investors. Not a good look.
Definitely not. So, okay, with Northumberland Living, we've certainly found these significant discrepancies, promises versus reality. Does a similar pattern show up when we look at the second company, WH 2022 Limited, trading as Aventurine Climate?
Let's see.
This one's pitched as a renewable energy investment, promising, get this, up to 32% returns. And it's partnering with a company called iDiverse, which is owned by Charles Green.
Right, 32% returns. When you connect that promise to the sort of bigger financial picture, the feasibility immediately raises questions.
Oh, so?
Well, our source highlights something quite practical. Often there's a commission paid to introducers, maybe around 20%.
Okay.
So the company itself is left with only 80% of your initial investment. Now, to generate a 32% return from that 80%, well, they'd need to almost double your money in a pretty short time frame.
Double it.
Almost, yeah. Which is, frankly, a very, very big stretch in the renewable energy sector, especially when you think about operational costs, project timelines. The typical returns just aren't usually that high that fast.
So it's a key thing for investors, isn't it?
Yeah.
Always ask how such high returns are actually generated, especially after commissions are taken out.
Absolutely. That how is crucial.
So, okay, even with those, let's say, ambitious return figures, a broker involved, sovereign resources, apparently claims Aventurine has already raised about £5 million through its loan notes.
5 million. Okay.
And interestingly, NCL, remember them from the Northumberland Living promotion.
Yes, new capital link.
They're also promoting Aventurine. And NCL claims Aventurine has secured prime sites for solar and wind power projects.
Prime sites. Now, this is where that tangled web really starts to show itself, because guess what one of these prime sites turns out to be?
Let me guess. Not actually prime, or something we've heard about already.
Exactly the latter. It's the very same gas peaking facility we just discussed.
The one bought from the company that's now in liquidation.
Precisely. The one bought for $1.5 million in late 2022 from the now liquidated Southbrook Gas Generation Limited.
So, an asset from a failed company linked to fossil fuels is being presented as a prime site for a renewable energy investment.
That seems to be the situation. The fact that this single, arguably troubled asset is being kind of recycled like this.
Well, it casts significant doubt on whether Aventurine can genuinely deliver on those ambitious promises. It's a classic case of, what you see advertised might not be what you're actually getting.
And this brings us to probably the biggest structural concern we found, right? This idea that WH 2022 Limited isn't just backing Aventurine. It's being used to secure two separate investment schemes.
Yes.
Basically, one pot, two promises. What are the dangers of setting things up like that?
This is a really critical risk factor. It's called cross-collateralization. And in high-risk finance, it is a major, major red flag.
Why is it so risky? Because it dramatically ramps up the risk for everyone involved. Think about it. So multiple different investments are all secured against the same underlying asset or pool of assets.
Okay.
So if that single asset in this case, perhaps primarily the gas peaking facility, runs into trouble, or if its value drops significantly,
then every investment linked to it is in trouble.
Instantly jeopardized, yes. It raises three absolutely urgent questions that anyone considering investing or already invested needs to ask.
What are they?
1. Are there genuinely enough assets within WH 2022, limited to properly back both of these investments, the property one and the renewables one? 2, if things do go wrong, which group of investors actually gets paid first? Is there a priority order?
And the third.
Maybe the most fundamental. What is the real market value of that gas peaking facility today, especially given the history of the company it came from? These questions really highlight the potential for huge, often hidden risks.
Hidden risks. And yet, despite all these warning signs we've talked through the questionable asset, the cross-collateralization, the investor complaints NCL is still promoting both Aventurine and William Jackson.
Still actively promoting.
Yeah, they even quote Jackson in one of their recent blogs, saying something like, we are focused on sustainable luxury developments and strong returns for our investors. The mix of property and renewables creates a robust investment model.
A robust model, he says. Interesting choice of words given the structure we've just discussed.
It is. But then there's this final, almost bizarre twist. The actual web address, the URL of that very same blog post promoting Jackson.
What about it?
It reads, newcapitallink.co.uk/is WH2022 limited a scam.
Wait, really? The URL asks if the company is a scam.
That's what it says. Now, look, it could just be a terrible mistake, right? A typo by whoever set up the website page. SEO gone wrong, maybe.
Possibly. Or perhaps trying to capture search traffic.
Still, for a company promoting investments, having a page address that literally asks, is WH2022 limited a scam? Well, it certainly raises a few eyebrows, doesn't it?
It's a very, very odd bit of digital real estate to own, as you say. Very strange.
Very strange indeed.
So look, when you pull all these different threads together, what you seem to be seeing across both Northumberland Living Elmwick and WH 2022 Aventurine is a pretty consistent pattern of behavior, wouldn't you say?
What's the pattern you see?
Well, there seems to be a persistent lack of transparency about how assets are truly secured, a reliance on complicated financial structures that, can easily obscure the underlying risks,
Right.
and just significant gaps between the confident promises made to investors and the actual verifiable documented backing for those promises.
Yeah.
For any potential investor, seeing that kind of pattern across related entities, it really signals potential high risks. Risks that are incredibly difficult to properly judge from the outside looking in. It's a definite warning sign to, dig much, much deeper. Or maybe just steer clear.
So I suppose the core takeaway from this whole deep dive is pretty stark then. There can often be this crucial and sometimes massive difference between the glossy advertised opportunity and the verifiable reality that you find when you actually check the documents, check the registrations, maybe even check the site itself.
And that's precisely why critical thinking, asking those tough questions, is just paramount for your own protection as an investor.
Especially when things sound a bit too good.
Exactly. Especially when the promises seem, a little too good to be true, or when the financial structures get really complicated and frankly opaque. You just have to look past the marketing hype and insist on seeing the verifiable facts.
So it leaves a question for you, the listener, doesn't it? In this increasingly complex, sometimes murky investment landscape, how much responsibility really falls on the individual investor to dig up these kinds of intricate details?
That's the challenge.
And what are the fundamental tools or maybe the key insights that are truly essential to protect yourself from getting caught up, from getting tangled in webs like this one? It's definitely something worth thinking about.